Morning light spilled over the city of Texas as it stirred to life. Cars threaded through traffic, footsteps echoed against the pavement, and conversations rose like a soft hum beneath towering buildings of glass and steel. Emma moved through it all with quiet determination. Her strides were sure, her chin lifted with a subtle confidence shaped by weeks of preparation. The pale blue folder in her hand bore no decoration, but the contents inside, resumes, certificates, carefully polished references, seemed to pulse with weight and possibility. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. Today was the day, the culmination of tireless effort, late-night research, and countless rewrites of cover letters. The job was more than just a career step. It was the doorway to everything Emma had envisioned for herself. Her fingers tightened briefly around the folder, not out of fear, but to ground herself. She had rehearsed this moment endlessly. The questions, the answers, the practiced smile that balanced professionalism with warmth. Yet as she neared her destination, small currents of uncertainty flickered in her mind. Would they see her potential? Would she find the words at the right moment? A gust of cool morning air swept through the street, catching the hem of her navy blazer. She adjusted it quickly, smoothing the fabric with a practiced hand. Every gesture she made felt precise, as if she were already seated in front of the interview panel and wanted to show them she belonged. The reflection in a shop window flashed by a young woman poised on the brink of change. Her dark hair tucked neatly behind her ears framed steady, intelligent eyes. Emma glanced at her watch. 15 minutes early. Perfect timing. Her mentor had always said, "Arrive early, breathe deeply, own the room before you enter it." She exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders relax, and quickened her pace. A surge of energy rose within her, not nerves exactly, but anticipation sharpened by ambition. Her shoes clicked softly on the pavement as she weaved through the commuters. Office workers with coffee cups, cyclists navigating tight lanes, street vendors lifting metal shutters. The world bustled around her, unaware of the silent resolve hardening in her chest. The office building finally loomed ahead. Its sleek glass facade caught the morning sun and splintered it into sharp lines and soft reflections. Emma's heart lifted slightly. This was the place. The company she had admired from afar. The position she had imagined herself holding long before she even submitted her application. The opportunity to bring her ideas to life and to prove herself in ways she had only dreamed of. As she approached the revolving doors, she slowed just a fraction. The hum of the street faded behind her. The moment stretched thin, balanced delicately between the familiar world she knew and the unknown future that waited beyond the glass. She straightened, adjusted her grip on the folder, and allowed a calm breath to steady her. With a final glance upward, Emma stepped closer to the entrance, ready to claim what she had worked so hard to reach. Emma's steps slowed as she neared the entrance. The glass doors loomed only a few strides away, polished and gleaming beneath the rising sun. Yet something tugged at the edge of her awareness, pulling her gaze slightly to the side. At the curb, an elderly man stood hunched beside an aging sedan, its faded paint chipped and dulled by time. The car sagged awkwardly on one side, a deflated tire resting limp against the rim. Hazard lights blinked in a steady, futile rhythm, unnoticed by the waves of pedestrians weaving past. His thin fingers trembled as they fumbled with a rusted jack, the metal clattering once against the asphalt. His gray coat hung too loose on narrow shoulders, and the faded cap shielding his silver hair drooped slightly to one side. Emma's feet faltered. For a heartbeat, she simply watched. Commuters streamed around him without pause, faces blank, eyes forward, preoccupied with schedules and morning calls. Nobody looked twice. The city, relentless in its momentum, moved on. Her gaze shifted instinctively back toward the building's entrance. Opportunity shimmered just beyond those glass doors. Every fiber in her body had been tuned for this moment. She could practically feel the boardroom's polished table beneath her fingertips, hear the questions waiting to test her mettle. Her fingers adjusted their hold on the folder reflexively, the weight of her ambition settling once again in her palm. But her eyes flicked back to the curb. The man had crouched slightly now, but his movements were slow, uncertain. His breath came in faint huffs, and his hand brushed against the jack without purpose. His struggle was quiet, almost invisible, yet unmistakably real. A flicker of conflict stirred deep within her chest. Logic whispered sharply, "Someone else will stop. You can't jeopardize this. Timing matters." You've worked too long for this chance. But something heavier, quieter, rose to meet it. A voice without words, one that echoed from deeper roots of conscience and memory. A father's gentle teachings. A mother's quiet example. Be the person who notices. Her brow tensed, a faint crease between her brows betraying the tug-of-war within. Time seemed to narrow, the sounds of the city dimming around her. She could see the weariness in the man's stooped frame, the quiet frustration tightening the corners of his mouth. He wasn't asking for help, but the need was there, plain and unspoken. Emma inhaled slowly through her nose, steadying herself. The exhale that followed was soft, resigned yet certain. Without another glance at the building, she bent gracefully at the waist, lowering her folder to the sidewalk. The crisp edges of her prepared documents brushed against concrete, but she didn't hesitate. Straightening, she crossed the few steps toward the curb. Her heels clicked softly before falling silent as she stopped beside him. For a brief moment, the man didn't notice her presence. His focus remained fixed on the uncooperative Jack, his brows knitted tightly together. "Excuse me," Emma said gently, her voice carrying just enough strength to cut through his concentration without startling him. The man lifted his head slowly. His eyes, pale and clouded slightly with age, met hers with mild surprise. Behind the lines and wear, there was kindness there, tinged with the faintest hint of embarrassment. "Do you need a hand?" she asked, her tone warm and unassuming. He blinked once, processing her offer, then offered a sheepish smile. "I wouldn't say no," he admitted quietly, his voice roughened by time but edged with gratitude. Without ceremony, Emma slipped off her blazer, folding it neatly over her arm, and crouched beside the tire. The scent of rubber and motor oil mingled faintly with the cool morning air. Her hands, careful and precise, reached for the jack. The metal was cold and unyielding, but her movements carried quiet confidence. The man watched her closely, still seeming surprised by her presence. "You're dressed too nice to be doing this," he remarked with a wry chuckle. Emma smiled softly, not looking up from her task. "Sometimes nice clothes have to wait," she replied simply. They worked in tandem, their unspoken coordination growing natural with each passing minute. He steadied the car while she adjusted the jack into place, guiding the worn tire from its mount with deliberate care. As they labored, the rush of the city blurred at the edges, cars moved, footsteps passed, conversations flitted. But here, in this small circle of effort, the moment slowed. Emma felt the faint sting of grime on her fingertips, the mild ache in her calves from crouching, but she didn't mind. Her heartbeat had slowed from the earlier rush of ambition, replaced now with a quiet steadiness. When the spare tire was finally secure and tightened, the man exhaled deeply, rolling back on his heels. Relief softened his lined features, and a broad, genuine smile spread across his face. "Couldn't have done it without you," he said sincerely. Emma rose to her feet, brushing her palms lightly against her skirt. "I'm glad I could help," she answered, her expression open and easy. As the man moved to gather his tools, Emma turned her head slightly. The office building still stood tall and distant behind her, its reflective glass catching streaks of sunlight. The day had shifted, her timeline fractured, but her composure remained intact. She retrieved her folder from the sidewalk, cradling it again in her arms. When she glanced back, the man was fastening the tools into his trunk, his movement steadier now. Emma's shoulders lifted subtly as she inhaled once more, the air crisp and full. She was ready to move on. Emma knelt beside the car, her skirt brushing damp concrete as her fingers worked steadily over the worn metal. The jack resisted at first, stubborn from disuse, but she didn't falter. Grease smudged the tips of her fingers, darkening the skin beneath her nails. Yet there was no hint of irritation in her face, only quiet focus and unspoken patience. Beside her, the elderly man crouched as well, holding the spare tire ready. His hands were steadier now, guided by the calm rhythm Emma had set. Occasionally, his gaze shifted to her curious, faintly astonished, but always laced with gratitude. "I can't believe you stopped," he said after a moment, voice edged with disbelief. "Most folks don't even look twice." Emma offered a small, easy smile. "You looked like you could use an extra pair of hands." He chuckled under his breath, the sound warm and genuine. "That's kind of you. I'd forgotten there were still people like that." She shrugged lightly, tugging the lug wrench into place with a quick twist. The drizzle had started almost unnoticed, fine droplets misting the air. It softened the city's sharp edges, making the distant horns and footsteps seem farther away. A faint sheen settled on Emma's hair and shoulders, but she paid no mind. Her mind rested here, in the simple task, in the company of someone who needed it. Between movements, conversation drifted naturally. Out here early for errands? The man asked, steadying the tire as she finished loosening the bolts. Emma's lips tilted into a half-smile. Job interview, actually. His brow lifted. Important one? Her laugh was quiet, the sound more acknowledgement than amusement. One I've been working toward for a long time. He blinked, expression softening with surprise. And you still stopped? She glanced sideways at him, her shoulders lifting in an understated shrug. It felt like the right thing to do. For a moment, he didn't respond. His gaze held hers longer than before, not prying, but reflective. Then, with a small nod, he handed her the spare. Together they fitted into place, their teamwork smooth and wordless now. Raindrops darkened the pavement around them. A damp strand of hair slipped loose near Emma's temple, but she brushed it back absently, her mind still on the task. Grease streaked faintly across the cuff of her sleeve, the once crisp fabric creased and softened from movement. Minutes passed unnoticed. There was an ease between them now, as if they'd known each other longer than these few shared moments. The final bolt tightened with a quiet click. Emma leaned back on her heels, exhaling slowly. The man straightened beside her, stretching stiff shoulders. His smile, wide and sincere, erased years from his face. Don't know how I would have managed that alone, he admitted, voice rough but warm. Emma rose to her feet, dusting her palms gently against her skirt. We got it done, she replied simply. She reached for her folder resting nearby and glanced instinctively at her watch. Her breath caught, just slightly, 20 minutes past her interview time. The numbers stared back at her, indifferent and unchanging. But instead of panic, something steadier settled into her chest. Her eyes lifted to meet the man's once more. His gratitude radiated clearly, no grand gestures or words needed. That, somehow, felt enough. He thanked her again, his tone thick with sincerity. His hand hovered as though he meant to shake hers, but hesitated, uncertain if it was too familiar. Emma spared him the worry, she smiled, nodding once with quiet reassurance. With a small wave, she turned toward the building in the distance. Her steps quickened as she moved, but there was no frantic rush in her pace. Whatever waited ahead, she had made her choice clearly and without regret. Behind her, the old man watched her go, a soft wonder lingering in his expression as the drizzle continued to fall. Emma stepped through the revolving doors, her breath shallow and quick from the hurried walk. Raindrops clung to her hair and lashes, soaking through the thin fabric of her blouse and darkening the hem of her skirt. The cool air of the lobby washed over her, crisp and still in contrast to the damp drizzle outside. She straightened instinctively, smoothing her blazer even though the effort did little to disguise the creases and damp spots that now marked it. The reception desk gleamed ahead, a wide arc of glass and brushed steel. Behind it sat a woman with a pristine black jacket and a headset resting lightly over sleek hair. Her expression was composed, practiced in the quiet art of greeting faces day after day. Emma approached, the soft squeak of her wet shoes against the marble floor the only sound accompanying her. She met the receptionist's gaze with a faint, hopeful smile. Good morning, she began, her voice still steady despite the thin edge of breathlessness. I'm here for the 10 o'clock interview for the marketing position. The receptionist's eyes softened slightly, her lips curving into a polite but regretful expression. She tapped the keyboard with practiced ease, eyes flickering over the screen before returning to Emma. I'm very sorry, she said gently. The interviews concluded about 20 minutes ago. The panel has already left for the day. For a moment, the words hovered in the space between them. Emma felt them settle against her chest, not heavy, not sharp, but final. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly, a quiet exhale slipping past her lips. There was no dramatic slump, no flash of frustration. She simply nodded once, her smile never faltering. Thank you, she replied calmly. The receptionist gave a small, understanding nod, perhaps expecting a protest or a plea. But none came. Emma turned with measured ease and walked back toward the exit, her steps unhurried despite the lingering damp in her shoes and the chill of rain still clinging to her skin. Outside, the drizzle had softened into a fine mist. The city stretched ahead of her, familiar and indifferent. Cars splashed through shallow puddles, umbrellas bobbed along sidewalks, and conversations drifted faintly from coffee shops and bus stops. Emma walked slowly, her arms relaxed at her sides, folder pressed gently against her ribs. The ache of missed opportunity sat quietly at the back of her mind, but it didn't weigh her down. Her expression remained calm, reflective rather than regretful. She took in the world around her, the wet sheen of the streets, the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers, the blurred reflections of streetlights in shallow pools. Some things mattered more than perfect timing, she thought. Some choices left no room for doubt. If there had been a voice to narrate the shape of her thoughts, it would have said simply, "Today, I chose right." Her pace steady and untroubled, Emma disappeared slowly into the moving city. Morning light filtered softly through the thin curtains of Emma's apartment, casting muted gold across the modest kitchen counter. The quiet hum of the city waking up drifted faintly through the windows, distant engines, scattered voices, the rhythmic patter of footsteps on wet pavement. Emma stood by the stove, the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee curling in the air. Her fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic of her mug, steady and unhurried. Despite the events of the previous day, her movements carried no trace of bitterness. If anything, there was a quiet ease to her routine. A new day had begun, simple and unmarked. She took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through her chest, grounding her. The sharp trill of her phone broke the calm. It vibrated gently on the counter beside her, screen lighting up with an unfamiliar number. Setting her mug aside, Emma wiped her hands on a dish towel before answering. "Hello." The voice on the other end was instantly recognizable, polished and kind. "Good morning. This is Clara from yesterday's interview panel." The receptionist. Her tone held none of the distance that had accompanied their last exchange. Instead, it carried a warmth that surprised Emma. "I wanted to reach out personally," Clara continued. "Mr. Grant asked me to contact you. He'd like to reschedule your interview for today, if you're still interested. We'd be happy to have you back at 10 o'clock. Emma blinked, the words settling slowly in her mind. Her fingers tightened slightly around the phone, though her breath remained calm. "I'd be glad to," she replied smoothly. Clara's voice brightened. "Wonderful. We'll see you then." The call ended, and Emma lowered the phone gently to the counter. A small, thoughtful smile touched the corners of her lips. No rush pulsed through her veins this time. No nervous rehearsing or frantic pacing. Only a cautious optimism steadied her pulse as she returned to her coffee, her gaze distant, contemplative. Later that morning, the familiar glass doors of the towering office building rose before her once more. The drizzle had lifted, leaving the sky clear and soft with scattered clouds. Emma's reflection met her in the polished surface of the entryway, a crisp blazer, hair neatly gathered, posture poised but relaxed. Inside, the lobby bustled quietly. Clara greeted her with a knowing smile and a gentle nod before leading her past the reception desk. This time, Emma's steps were even, measured. The weight of expectation had shifted, not heavier, not lighter, but different. They reached a wide wooden door. Clara gave it a light knock before pushing it open, ushering Emma inside. The boardroom stretched ahead, sleek lines, tall windows, the sweep of a long mahogany table. A few figures in business attire lined the sides, their conversations soft and purposeful. At the far end of the table stood a man in a tailored navy suit, his posture confident and easy. It took only a breath for recognition to settle. Silver hair, sharp eyes, the quiet strength of his frame, it was unmistakable. Gone were the worn coat and trembling hands. Instead, he carried himself with the assured grace of someone accustomed to commanding a room. The man from the curb. The flat tire. Emma's eyes widened, her composure flickering as surprise rippled across her face. The man's gaze met hers, and a warm, knowing smile spread across his features. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said, his voice resonant and clear. "It's good to see you again." She blinked once, absorbing his words, her mind connecting fragments swiftly and cleanly. "I'm James Grant," he continued easily, CEO of Grant & Company. A quiet hush settled over the room, as though the surrounding conversations had instinctively quieted to grant space for this exchange. His expression held no trace of superiority or challenge, only a deep, genuine respect that mirrored the gratitude she'd seen in his eyes the day before. For a moment, Emma stood motionless, her breath caught between disbelief and understanding. And then, just as naturally, her lips curved into a small, steady smile. She straightened her shoulders and stepped forward, her cautious optimism giving way to something warmer, brighter. "Mr. Grant," she replied evenly. "It's good to see you again, too." Emma took her seat at the polished boardroom table, her posture upright but unforced. Across from her, Mr. Grant remained standing, his presence calm yet commanding. The other board members sat in quiet attention, their expressions open and measured. Mr. Grant rested his hands lightly on the back of a chair as he addressed the room, though his gaze never drifted far from Emma. Yesterday, he began, his voice smooth and steady, I had no intention of conducting interviews in the traditional sense. He paused, allowing the words to settle. His eyes held a quiet clarity, as though he was drawing back a curtain just enough to reveal something deeper. I've found over the years, he continued, that resumes and rehearsed answers tell only a fraction of a person's story. True character, however, reveals itself when no one's watching, or at least, when it seems that way. A gentle murmur rippled through the board members. Several nodded faintly, their approval subtle but unmistakable. Mr. Grant's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. You didn't know who I was yesterday. You didn't know anyone was paying attention. And yet, you chose to help without hesitation. You gave up something important to you, not for recognition, but simply because you saw a person in need. Emma's breath caught softly. The room around her faded just slightly, her focus narrowing on his words. Her hands rested lightly on the folder in front of her, fingers relaxed but attentive. I saw kindness, Mr. Grant continued, initiative, and integrity. Qualities that no resume can fully capture. And frankly, qualities that matter far more to this company than a perfectly timed arrival. He straightened slowly, his gaze steady. We can teach skills. We can guide talent. But we cannot teach heart. There was no flourish, no dramatics. Only simple truth. He reached across the table, sliding a neatly prepared contract toward her. If you're still interested, Miss Carter, I would be honored to offer you the position. Silence wrapped gently around the room, not heavy but reverent. Emma's lips parted slightly, her eyes wide, not with disbelief, but with the quiet flood of realization. Her chest rose with a measured breath, and then a smile, soft, radiant, broke across her face. Her fingers touched the edge of the contract lightly, as though grounding herself in the moment. The emotions that welled within her were unmistakable. Gratitude shimmered openly in her expression, mingling with a deep, earned pride. Thank you, she said softly, her voice steady despite the weight of emotion behind it. I'd be honored to accept. Mr. Grant nodded once, his smile warm and assured. Around the table, the board members exchanged approving glances, their earlier reserve replaced with quiet satisfaction. The moment lingered on Emma's face, her eyes alight with happiness that rose steadily from within. Realization washed over her fully now, not just of the job, but of something far deeper, that integrity, even when unnoticed, always leaves its mark. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the office, casting a soft glow over the glass walls and polished surfaces. Emma moved confidently through the open workspace, her stride measured and assured. Gone was the tentative nervousness of her earlier days. Now, she carried herself with a quiet authority that had settled naturally into place. At a long table in one of the meeting rooms, she sat at the head of a small team. Papers spread neatly before them, graphs and ideas sketched across whiteboards. Emma listened attentively as her colleagues spoke, nodding thoughtfully, occasionally leaning forward to ask a precise question or offer a gentle suggestion. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and calm, inviting collaboration rather than commanding it. A flash, brief, almost imperceptible, flickered across her mind. Her hands, stained faintly with grease, tightening a lug nut under a gray sky. The elderly man's quiet gratitude as they stood beside the car. The memory softened her features momentarily, her lips curving in a small, reflective smile. She refocused on the discussion at hand, her presence steady and warm. In another moment, she stood before a whiteboard, marker in hand. Her ideas unfolded clearly, each point building naturally upon the last. Around her, colleagues leaned forward, their interest evident. Emma's gaze moved easily across the room, making space for each voice, ensuring that no one was overlooked. Again, a flash, her fingers closing gently around the old man's trembling hand as they tested the tightened bolts together. The brief exchange of words that had carried more weight than either had spoken aloud. The present returned seamlessly. Emma passed a document to a junior team member, her expression encouraging and patient. It was clear, even without words, that her leadership did not hinge on authority alone. It rested on trust and mutual respect. Time passed fluidly. Projects advanced, meetings concluded. Emma moved through her day with unhurried energy, leaving traces of confidence and kindness in each interaction. Team members exchanged glances of quiet appreciation. Her impact was not loud, but it was undeniable. Later, as the afternoon light mellowed into gold, Emma stepped into her office. The space was simple but elegant, a reflection of her unpretentious style. She crossed to the large window that overlooked the city. Beyond the glass, buildings stretched into the distance, bustling streets threading between them. Her hands rested lightly in front of her, her posture relaxed. Her gaze swept over the view, not with detachment, but with calm reflection. The hum of the office behind her faded slightly as her thoughts drifted. A final flash returned, Mr. Grant's smile as he introduced himself in the boardroom, his words steady and sincere. "We cannot teach heart." Emma's lips curved slowly, her eyes bright with quiet understanding. She took a deep breath, her shoulders lifting and settling easily. The screen softened. White text appeared against the closing scene, the words emerging gently as soft music swelled in the background. Kindness never goes unnoticed. Character always finds its way. Emma's silhouette lingered a moment longer against the expanse of glass and sky, poised and thoughtful. The music's final notes echoed lightly as the scene dissolved into black, leaving only the quiet resonance of her journey behind. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.